This party line vote represents a major accomplishment for Democrats after wrangling over President Biden's economic agenda for over a year. House members will now vote on it. As Democrats overcame months of political infighting to deliver the centerpiece of President Biden's long-stalled economic agenda, the Senate approved a package on Sunday that combats climate change, lowers healthcare costs, raises taxes on some billion-dollar corporations and reduces the federal deficit. With a promise to bring financial relief to ordinary Americans, Democrats took control of Congress and the White House last year. After a tie-breaking vote from Vice President Harris, the 50-50 Senate sent the bill to the House, which will vote on it and send it to Biden later this week. Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 would authorize the largest spending surge in U.S. history to combat global warming, about $370 billion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2022. In addition, the proposal would fulfill Democrats' years-old promise to reduce prescription drug costs. It is expected that the bill will raise enough money to cover its new spending by tweaking federal tax laws, primarily to target tax cheats and billion-dollar companies that pay no taxes. A final fiscal analysis of the Democratic legislation has not yet been provided, but it is expected to reduce projected budget deficits by $300 billion over the next decade. This is one of the most significant pieces of legislation passed in a decade, Senate Majority Leader Charles E. Schumer, DNY, said in an interview before the bill's passage in the Senate. Things that Americans have longed for, and couldn't get done. Democrats and Republicans negotiated among themselves to shepherd the package to the chamber floor due to the political realities of a narrowly divided Senate. It hinged on a breakthrough deal negotiated in late July between Schumer and Senator Joe Manchin III, DW. VA, a moderate who nearly 8 months ago single-handedly scuttled a previous attempt to advance his party's agenda. And its fate teetered at one point because of a last-minute snag with Senator Kyrsten Sinema, D. To assuage Manchin, Democrats had to give up some of their more ambitious plans: free pre-kindergarten for all, paid family and medical leave for workers nationwide, and offer new support for fossil fuels. To satisfy Sinema, meanwhile, party leaders repeatedly dialed back their proposed tax policies, particularly those targeting wealthy investors. In the final hours of debate, Senator Bernie Sanders, IVT, tried unsuccessfully to restore some of the jettisoned proposals, including a significant expansion of Medicare to provide dental, vision and hearing coverage to the elderly. Delivering multiple fiery speeches, Sanders implored his colleagues to improve a bill that does nothing to address the greatest financial challenges facing families. Repeatedly, though, Democrats rejected even ideas they once supported, leaving Sanders the lone aye vote on the amendments, as they labored to protect a compromise bill they saw as fragile. Many Democrats emphasized the need to overlook the losses and savor the gains in a package that weeks earlier had seemed out of reach. "This is not Bernie's bill. I understand that," Manchin told reporters Sunday. "But it's a piece of legislation that's a tremendous piece of legislation. It's a balanced approach." Republicans, meanwhile, lambasted their Democratic counterparts for the drug pricing program, massive climate spending and new tax policies. During nearly 19 hours of debate, GOP lawmakers alleged that the measure would worsen inflation at a time when prices already are rising at the fastest rate in 4 decades. They painted the tax provisions, in particular, as a threat to workers and their wages, even though the bill would not raise rates on individuals. And they unleashed a battery of unsuccessful amendments that forced Democrats to take uncomfortable votes on issues including immigration. It does nothing to bring the economy out of stagnation and recession. But rather, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 gives us higher taxes, more spending, higher prices, and an army of IRS agents, Senator Mike Crapo, Idaho, the top Republican on the tax-focused Senate Finance Committee, said, referring to a big infusion of cash that would be dedicated to staffing up the Internal Revenue Service. For Senate Democrats, though, the outcome marks the latest victory in a spate of legislative accomplishments, including bipartisan efforts to rethink gun laws, improve veterans' health care and boost the manufacture of much-needed high-tech computer chips. It comes 2 days after a federal labor report showed the U.S. economy had recovered all the jobs it had lost since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, a positive sign for the president as fears about a recession hover over Washington. Even before the vote was final, Democratic lawmakers on the chamber floor rejoiced and cheered, shaking hands and hugging, as their Republican counterparts cast their votes and headed for the exits for a month-long summer break. Manchin made a beeline for Schumer's desk, as the two men leaned their heads together and clasped their hands. Senator Brian Schatz, D. Hawaii, a proponent of climate change provisions, broke into tears. The developments offer fresh political fuel for Biden and Democratic leaders as they make their case to voters ahead of the midterm elections. The fast-approaching November contest serves as a referendum on Democratic control of Washington over the past 2 years, injecting urgency into Democrats' once-defunct push to pass an economic package. In a statement, Biden hailed the outcome and praised Democrats for having sided with American families over special interests. Acknowledging the many compromises that led to the vote, he encouraged the House to act swiftly. Lawmakers could take up the bill Friday. The prescription drug pricing reforms aim to help cut costs for seniors enrolled in Medicare. It caps their out-of-pocket costs at $2,000 annually, while allowing the U.S. government to negotiate the price of a small set of medicines beginning in 2026. The landmark proposal is expected to save elderly Americans money and achieve billions in savings for Washington over the next decade. Pharmaceutical giants, which forcefully opposed the bill, also would be required to pay rebates to the federal government if they raise Medicare drug prices beyond the rate of inflation. However, Democrats did not achieve everything they had hoped for. After Republicans stripped insulin from Sunday's bill, an attempt to lower and cap its price failed. Since the GOP previously failed to support a bipartisan effort to reduce the cost of a life-saving diabetes drug, their opposition seemed to doom the plan for the remainder of the year. The reality is the cost of insulin is not just out of control, it is devastating people, Senator Patty Murray, D. Wash, said before nearly every Republican voted to weaken the cap. The bill also includes $64 billion to stave off health insurance premium increases for about 13 million Americans who buy coverage through state and federal exchanges under the Affordable Care Act. These beneficiaries currently receive discounted coverage under a coronavirus-era program set to expire this year, threatening them with premium increases into hundreds of dollars next month. To respond to a rapidly warming planet, Democrats set aside about $370 billion for energy security and climate change. The investments include a bevy of tax credits to incentivize wind, solar and other renewable power sources, while helping people purchase new or used electric vehicles and install energy-efficient heating and cooling systems in their homes. The bill creates a $1.5 billion program that includes new payments for companies that cut emissions of methane, a potent greenhouse gas, with some penalties for those firms that do not. While the new spending contributes greatly toward Biden's emission reduction goals, Democrats coupled it with additional provisions that boost fossil fuels, an approach necessary to win Manchin's support. Democrats agreed to mandate new oil and gas leasing in the Gulf of Mexico and off the coast of Alaska, while party leaders committed to pursue a separate bill in the coming months that makes it easier for developers to override some environmental objections. That proposal could greatly benefit a long-stalled pipeline in Manchin's home state, a trade-off that some Democrats described as an uncomfortable necessity. "We made a deal with Joe Manchin, so there was always going to be something for fossil," Schatz said, emphasizing that the bill would still reduce emissions by 40% over the next 8 years. "It also has stuff I don't like, but that's the nature of getting a bill done that all of us can support." To pay for the spending, Democrats included a new tax on a set of large companies that currently pay nothing to the U.S. government, and added about $80 billion for the IRS to pursue those who dodge what they owe. They also approved a 1% tax on companies that buy back their own stock, a practice that many party lawmakers see as detrimental to the economy, to the benefit of wealthy shareholders and executives. But the tax proposals are a far cry from what Democrats had envisioned, part of a last-minute effort to ensure the support of Sinema, another moderate in their ranks. The Arizona lawmaker agreed last week to vote for the measure after party leaders agreed to scale back the minimum corporate tax and scrap a separate plan to close a tax loophole for wealthy hedge fund, real estate and investment managers. On Sunday, the senator intervened again, this time in a way that benefited private equity and the companies in their portfolios. That forced Democrats to rethink their minimum tax, and essentially carve out the industry, to retain her support. Democrats opted to move the Inflation Reduction Act through the budget reconciliation process through a series of similar compromises. Through this tactic, they sidestepped GOP opposition, avoided the 60-vote filibuster requirement, and prevailed with the support of their 50 senators plus Harris' tiebreaker vote. As a result of the maneuver, moderates such as Manchin and Sinema were able to exert considerable influence in negotiations with the rest of their party, which supported a more ambitious economic package. Democratic internal tensions have been on full display since the Build Back Better Act, a much larger, roughly $2 trillion plan, failed to move. A precursor bill provided free child care, free community college for low-income Americans, and subsidized health insurance, along with provisions to ease immigration. Sanders, whose budget work enabled the bill, called it the most ambitious legislation since the Great Depression, drawing its name from Biden's 2020 campaign slogan. At a time of great economic and political uncertainty, Manchin never supported the high price tag, arguing that it might worsen the country's fiscal health. As Manchin staked his public opposition to the bill, the Senate never considered it, angering his party and drawing a rare White House rebuke. "We were probably too aggressive," said Senator Mark R. Warner, DVA, a behind-the-scenes negotiator over the past year, reflecting on what went wrong. "The idea we were going to solve virtually every issue in one bill was probably a bridge too far." By January, Democrats under Biden began rethinking the Schumer-led package. Manchin said in July that he would not support a bill that raised taxes and spent money on climate change. Despite supporting some of those goals, Manchin opposed them because of rising food and gas prices. In the end, Schumer and Manchin worked out their differences, forged an agreement, and sold it to a caucus that had hoped for something more robust. With an election less than 3 months away, Democrats were eager to take advantage after a year of failure and endless bickering. "You could always say, 'I wanted this, I wanted that, but we battled for decades,'" said Senator Ron Wyden, D.O., the leader of the tax-focused Senate Finance Committee.